Cheating millionaire husband
Her net
laughed while
worth is
signing divorce
$5
papers
billion.
until the judge read his wife's net worth. My beautiful family, what do you think? Will this be a revenge story or a second chance? I promise the ending will satisfy your heart. This is one of the most beautiful stories, so real you'll feel like you're living with the characters. Don't skip a single moment. Hi, my beautiful, loyal, most loving and caring family. Let us begin with love and prayer. Heavenly Father, I lift my voice for this family you have given me. Bless every woman who listens with strength and grace. Bless every mother who prays in silence for her children. Bless every man who carries burdens with dignity. Heal every broken heart. Bring light to every home and fill every soul with peace and everlasting joy. But my family, I must speak with truth. These stories are not just words. They are my blood, my tears, my love. Yet many have stopped watching till the end, and this hurts deeply. It feels as if my sacrifice is unseen. Still, my love for you will never fade, because true love is stronger than pain. I understand new viewers may carry doubts, but love without trust cannot grow. I have never deceived you. Every story is written with honor, with respect, with devotion to every woman, every family, every heart. If your love is true, write present. If you stand with me, write I am with Mr. Peter. And now I bring you something new. A new channel, a home for shorter stories under 1 hour. You will find the link in the community post. Don't forget to subscribe, because this is not only my work, this is our family's journey. We are not scattered voices. We are one heart, one family forever. The family of Mr. Peter. Some women lie about their age, others about their weight. But Simone Manuel had built her entire existence around the most dangerous lie of all. She had convinced the world she was nobody. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Stanford's Tresida Union as Simone Manuel moved through her evening shift at Ground Zero Coffee with the unconscious grace of someone born to ballrooms, not barista stations. Her slender fingers, which should have been adorned with diamonds worth more than most people's houses, instead bore only the calluses of honest work and a simple silver ring she'd bought herself. What the bustling crowd of students didn't know, what nobody could have guessed, was that the young woman refilling their coffee cups was the sole heir to the Manuel Communications empire, a media dynasty worth $12 billion that controlled news networks, entertainment studios, and publishing houses across 6 continents. "Excuse me, miss?" Simone looked up from wiping down the espresso machine to find herself staring into the most striking pair of green eyes she'd ever seen. The man they belonged to was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it while studying. His expensive watch caught the light, but his smile was what made her heart skip. "Another coffee?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite the flutter in her chest. "Actually," he said, leaning against the counter with an easy confidence that spoke of privilege, "I was wondering if you'd join me for one sometime. Away from here." "I'm working," she replied, though every instinct screamed at her to say yes immediately. "I mean when you're not working. I'm Rye, by the way, Rye Benjamin." Benjamin. Simone's mind quickly catalogued what she knew about the Benjamin family. Luxury jewelry empire, old money, respectable but nowhere near her father's league. Still, there was something in his eyes that had nothing to do with business dynasties or family fortunes. "Simone," she said, extending her hand. "Simone. Harris." The lie came easily now, after 2 years of practice. His handshake was firm, warm, and lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "So, Simone Harris, would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow night?" Every fiber of her being wanted to say yes, but Simone had learned to be careful. "I don't even know you." "Then let's fix that," Rye grinned. "I'm 24, I study business, I have an irrational fear of butterflies, and I make terrible jokes when I'm nervous. I'm also completely fascinated by the girl who makes the best coffee on campus and reads Dostoevsky during her breaks. Simone glanced down at the worn copy of Crime and Punishment beside the register, surprised he'd noticed. Most people saw the uniform and assumed she was exactly what she appeared to be. "One dinner," she said finally, "somewhere quiet. I know just the place." The next evening, Simone stood outside Romano's, a small Italian restaurant near campus that was the antithesis of the Michelin-starred establishments she'd grown up frequenting. She'd chosen her outfit carefully: jeans, a simple sweater, and flats that had never graced a red carpet. "You look beautiful," Rai said when he saw her, and the genuine admiration in his voice made her pulse quicken. "Thank you," she replied, following him to a corner booth with cracked leather seats and checkered tablecloths. "Sorry it's not fancier," he said as they settled in. "I thought about taking you somewhere expensive, but I figured we should probably figure out if we can hold a conversation first." If only he knew that she owned shares in restaurant chains that made this place look like peasant food by comparison. Instead, she smiled, "I prefer places where you can actually hear yourself think." Over plates of surprisingly good pasta and a bottle of Chianti that cost less than her usual lunch, Simone found herself genuinely relaxed for the first time in months. Rai asked her about her favorite books, her dreams, her thoughts on everything from politics to philosophy. He didn't once mention money, status, or connections. "Tell me about your family," he said eventually, twirling linguine around his fork. The question hit like a physical blow. Here was the moment she'd been dreading, the lie that would either build the foundation of their relationship or destroy it before it began. "I lost my parents in a car accident when I was 16, she said, reciting the story her father's team had crafted so carefully. "I've been on my own since then. Scholarships, work-study programs, that sort of thing." Ray's expression immediately softened with genuine compassion. "God, Simone, I'm so sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult." The kindness in his voice made her hate herself for the deception, but she'd come too far to turn back now. "You learn to be strong when you have to. You're amazing," he said quietly. "I don't think I could have handled something like that with half your grace." 3,000 miles away, in a Manhattan penthouse that occupied an entire floor of a building David Manuel owned, her father was probably having dinner with senators or movie stars. Her trust fund accrued more money in interest each day than most people earned in a year. But looking across the table at Rai Benjamin, seeing the genuine admiration in his eyes, Simone felt richer than she ever had in her life. "What about you?" she asked, deflecting attention from herself. "Tell me about the Benjamin family jewelry empire." "How did you—" he started, then caught himself. "Of course you'd know. Everyone does." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." "No, it's fine. It's just refreshing to meet someone who isn't immediately calculating what I'm worth." He paused, studying her face. "My family's been in luxury jewelry for 3 generations. We're comfortable, but we're not exactly royalty." Comfortable. Simone almost smiled at the understatement. Rai's family was worth nearly $1 billion, but compared to the Manuel empire, he was practically middle class. "Money doesn't impress me," she said honestly, though for reasons he could never imagine. "Good," Rai replied, reaching across the table to touch her hand, "because I'd rather impress you with who I am than what I have." The electricity that shot through her at his touch was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Men had pursued her before, countless fortune hunters drawn to the Manuel name and wealth, but none had ever looked at her the way Rai did, as if she were the most fascinating person in the room rather than the richest. "What do you want to do with your life?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Honestly, I want to build something meaningful. The jewelry business is successful, but it's my grandfather's legacy, not mine. I want to create something that matters, something that helps people." His passion was intoxicating. Here was a man with everything handed to him who still wanted to earn his place in the world. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was hiding from the very wealth and power he respected. As the evening progressed, Simone found herself falling deeper under his spell. Rai was intelligent without being condescending, ambitious without being ruthless, and kind in ways that seemed as natural as breathing. When he walked her back to her modest apartment building, she felt a pang of guilt about the deception. "I had an amazing time tonight," he said, stopping at the entrance to her building. "So did I. Would you like to do it again, maybe this weekend?" Simone hesitated. Every date would mean more lies, deeper deception, but looking at his hopeful expression, she couldn't bring herself to say no. "I'd like that very much." When he kissed her goodnight, a soft, tentative touch of lips that promised so much more, Simone felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. As she watched him drive away in his understated BMW, she whispered a prayer to the universe. "Please don't let this destroy us both." Back in her apartment, Simone called her father on the encrypted phone he'd insisted she keep. "How's the experiment going, sweetheart?" David Manuel's warm voice filled her small kitchen. "I think I'm in trouble, Daddy." "Trouble? Has someone discovered who you are?" "No," Simone said, sinking onto her second-hand couch. "Worse. I think I'm falling in love." David Manuel was quiet for a long moment. He'd indulged his daughter's desire for anonymity because he understood her need to be loved for herself rather than her inheritance, but he'd always feared this moment when the lie became too complicated to maintain. "Tell me about him." "His name is Rai Benjamin. He's wonderful, Daddy, kind and genuine and—" She paused, tears threatening. "And I'm lying to him about everything." "Not everything, sweetheart. Your heart is real. Your feelings are real. The rest is just details. Important details. Perhaps. But love has a way of making details less important than we think they are." As Simone hung up the phone, she stared at the photograph on her mantel, the only picture in the apartment that showed her true life. Her and her father at last year's media summit, surrounded by presidents and prime ministers. She looked like a different person in that photo, polished and powerful and completely out of Rai Benjamin's league. But she didn't want to be that person anymore. She wanted to be the girl who served coffee and read Russian novels and made a brilliant, kind man smile just by walking into the room. Outside her window, the Stanford campus sparkled with possibility. Somewhere out there, Rai Benjamin was probably thinking about their date, planning their next one, completely unaware that he'd just asked out one of the most powerful women in the world. The masquerade had begun, and Simone Manuel, for the first time in her privileged life, was about to discover what it truly meant to risk everything for love. But love, as she would soon learn, required more than just the courage to fall. It demanded the strength to trust, the wisdom to forgive, and the faith to believe that some treasures were worth more than all the empires in the world. Would her desperate gamble for authentic love prove to be the greatest investment of her life? Or would the weight of her deception destroy the one thing money could never buy? Chapter 2. Seeds of Poison. Jennifer Benjamin had built her reputation on reading people like ancient texts, but the young woman her son brought home was written in a language she couldn't decipher, and that terrified her more than any threat she'd ever faced. The Waterford crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the Benjamin family's formal dining room as Jennifer Benjamin adjusted the place settings for the third time. Everything had to be perfect for this dinner, the first time her son would bring his mysterious girlfriend home to meet the family. Jennifer had been asking careful questions about this Simone Harris for weeks, and every answer only deepened her suspicions. A scholarship student, Rai claimed, an orphan who worked multiple jobs to support herself. The story was compelling, even sympathetic, but Jennifer Benjamin hadn't survived 30 years of high society by taking anything at face value. "Mother, please promise me you'll be nice to her," Rai said as he adjusted his tie in the foyer mirror. "Simone is special." "Of course, darling," Jennifer replied smoothly, though her smile never reached her eyes. "I'm sure she's lovely." When the doorbell rang, Jennifer positioned herself strategically in the living room where she could observe their guests' reactions to the Benjamin family's obvious wealth. The Persian rugs alone were worth more than most people's annual salaries. The paintings were museum-quality pieces that had been featured in Architectural Digest. If this girl was truly from the background Rai described, she should be intimidated, overwhelmed, perhaps even a little clumsy in such surroundings. Instead, Simone Manuel entered the Benjamin mansion as if she'd been born in palaces. "Mrs. Benjamin, thank you so much for having me," Simone said, extending her hand with perfect poise. Her grip was confident, her posture impeccable, and her eyes swept the room with appreciation rather than awe. "Please call me Jennifer," she replied, studying every micro-expression on the girl's face. "What a lovely dress." Simone wore a simple navy blue dress that looked modest until Jennifer's trained eye recognized the subtle signs of exceptional quality, the perfect drape that came only from expert tailoring, the fabric that whispered rather than announced its expense. "Thank you, I got it at a little boutique near campus." Another lie, though Jennifer couldn't prove it. That dress was worth at least $2,000, far beyond the reach of any scholarship student. "Simone, this is my father, Harold Benjamin," Rai said as they moved to the living room. Harold Benjamin, a distinguished man in his 70s who'd built the jewelry empire from his father's small shop, took Simone's hand with genuine warmth. "Welcome to our home, my dear. Rai has told us so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Simone replied with a laugh that was musical without being artificial. As they settled into conversation before dinner, Jennifer deployed her first test. She casually mentioned the Rothschild auction they'd attended the previous week, dropping names and prices that should have meant nothing to a girl from Simone's supposed background. "The Monet went for $47 million, Jennifer said, watching Simone's reaction carefully. "Quite reasonable for a piece from his Water Lilies series." "The 1919 piece?" Simone asked without thinking. "I read that it had been privately held by the same family since the 1920s. It must have been emotional for them to let it go." Jennifer's eyes sharpened. How did a coffee shop employee know the provenance of museum-quality art? "You seem quite knowledgeable about art," Jennifer observed. Simone realized her mistake immediately. I enjoy reading about it. The library has wonderful art books." "Of course," Jennifer smiled, filing away the information for later analysis. Dinner was an exercise in psychological warfare disguised as pleasant conversation. Jennifer asked seemingly innocent questions designed to trip up someone maintaining a false identity, while Simone navigated each trap with increasing anxiety. "Where did you attend high school, dear?" Jennifer inquired over the soup course. "Lincoln High in Sacramento," Simone replied. She'd memorized every detail of the fictional backstory her father's team had created, complete with fabricated yearbooks and planted references. "How interesting. I have a dear friend whose daughter taught there for several years." "Patricia Wilmington? Perhaps you knew her?" Simone's heart raced. There was no Patricia Wilmington. Jennifer was testing her. "I don't recall that name, but Lincoln was quite large." "Of course." Harold Benjamin, oblivious to the undercurrents, asked about Simone's studies and career aspirations. Her answers revealed an intellect and sophistication that impressed him greatly, though they only made Jennifer more suspicious. "You speak beautifully," Harold commented. "Have you studied abroad?" "No, sir. I've always been here in California." Another lie. Simone had spent summers at finishing schools in Switzerland and had studied for a year at Oxford, experiences that had shaped her accent and mannerisms in subtle but unmistakable ways. "Strange," Jennifer murmured. "You have such refined diction, almost European." "I watch a lot of BBC," Simone said weakly. After dinner, as Rai walked Simone to her car, Jennifer cornered her husband in his study. "That girl is not who she claims to be," Jennifer announced without preamble. Harold looked up from his evening brandy with surprise. "I thought she was delightful, intelligent, well-mannered, clearly devoted to our son." "Exactly. Too intelligent, too well-mannered. Harold, she knew details about the Rothschild auction that art historians would admire. She discussed international economics during dinner with the fluency of someone who reads the Financial Times daily, not someone struggling to pay tuition. Perhaps she's simply well-read. Well-read enough to know that the 1919 Monet had specific provenance? Well-read enough to discuss the European Central Bank's monetary policy with accuracy? That wasn't casual knowledge, Harold. That was insider understanding. Harold considered this. His wife might be many things, but she wasn't stupid. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that our son has fallen for a very sophisticated con artist. That girl is playing a role, and she's playing it beautifully." Meanwhile, in the car outside, Rai was apologizing for his mother's interrogation. "She seems suspicious of everyone," Simone said carefully. "She's protective, sometimes too protective." Rai took her hand. "Did I mention you were amazing tonight? The way you handled her questions, the way you talked with my father about his business. You're incredible." If only he knew how incredible. David Manuel's dinner conversations routinely included discussions of global markets, international politics, and cultural trends that shaped entire industries. Simone had been raised in boardrooms and state dinners. Discussing European monetary policy was as natural to her as breathing. "Your family seems wonderful," she lied. "They are, and they're going to love you once they get to know you." As Rai drove her home, Simone stared out the window at the lights of Palo Alto and wondered how long she could maintain this charade. Every lie built walls between them, but the truth felt even more dangerous. How could she explain that she'd been pretending to be poor when she could buy his family's business with pocket change? 3 weeks later, Jennifer Benjamin sat in her private office, reviewing the report from the private investigator she'd hired. The findings were disturbing in their absence of findings. "There's no record of Simone Harris before her enrollment at Stanford," Detective Morrison explained. "No high school yearbooks, no social media history, no paper trail whatsoever. It's as if she materialized from thin air 2 years ago." "That's impossible." "Not impossible, Mrs. Benjamin, just expensive. Someone with enough resources could create an entirely new identity, complete with planted references and false documentation." Jennifer felt vindicated. Her suspicions had been correct. Simone Harris was a fraud, but who was she really, and what did she want with Rai? "I want you to dig deeper," Jennifer instructed. "Find out who she really is and what she's after. That could take months and cost. I don't care what it costs. My son is being targeted by a professional, and I intend to expose her before she destroys his life." The campaign began subtly. Jennifer started planting small seeds of doubt in casual conversations with Rai. "Have you noticed how Simone never talks about her childhood?" she mentioned over breakfast. "Most people have stories, memories, things that shaped them, but she deflects every time you ask about her past." "She's probably still grieving, Mother. Losing your parents that young would be traumatic." "Of course, darling. I just think it's interesting how she's so polished for someone from her circumstances." Jennifer's poison worked slowly but effectively. She began pointing out inconsistencies: Simone's knowledge of wine, her familiarity with fine art, her instinctive understanding of social protocols that should have been foreign to her. Watch how she handles the silverware tonight, Jennifer whispered to Rai before another family dinner. See if someone who grew up eating cafeteria food knows which fork to use for the fish course. Rai found himself observing Simone with new eyes, noticing things he'd missed before. Her posture was too perfect, her table manners too refined, her cultural knowledge too extensive. Small doubts began to creep in. "Where did you learn French?" he asked one evening after she'd automatically responded to a waiter at a restaurant. Simone's face flushed. "I took it in high school." "You must have had an excellent teacher." "Yes," she said quietly. "Excellent." The truth was that Simone spoke 7 languages fluently, taught by private tutors who'd cost more per hour than most people earned in a week. But how could she explain that without revealing everything? Jennifer Benjamin watched her son's growing confusion with satisfaction. Soon she would present him with evidence that would shatter his illusions about his precious girlfriend. She had no way of knowing that in trying to expose what she thought was deception, she was actually destroying the most genuine love her son would ever find. The stage was set for a tragedy of errors, where truth would be mistaken for lies, and lies would masquerade as truth. In her gilded cage of suspicion and manipulation, Jennifer Benjamin was orchestrating the destruction of the very happiness she claimed to protect. But the most dangerous poison isn't the one that kills quickly. It's the one that spreads slowly, infecting every thought and memory, until love itself becomes indistinguishable from betrayal. Chapter 3. The Unraveling. The most perfect lies are destroyed not by the truth, but by better lies crafted by those who mistake love for weakness and trust for stupidity. 2 years had passed since that first dinner at Romano's, and the Benjamin family mansion buzzed with preparations for their annual charity gala, the social event that defined San Francisco's elite calendar. Crystal stemware caught the light from antique chandeliers, while staff arranged elaborate floral displays worth more than most people's cars. Tonight, 500 of the city's most influential figures would gather to bid on luxury items for children's charities, and Jennifer Benjamin intended to use the occasion for her masterstroke. "Everything looks magnificent, Mother," Rai said, as he adjusted his black tie in the foyer mirror. At 26, he'd grown more confident in his role as heir to the Benjamin legacy, though his greatest pride remained the woman who'd agreed to marry him 6 months earlier. "Thank you, darling. I do hope Simone will feel comfortable tonight. Such a grand affair can be overwhelming for someone unaccustomed to this level of society." The barb was delivered with surgical precision, designed to plant doubt without seeming malicious. Jennifer had perfected this technique over months of psychological warfare disguised as motherly concern. Simone descended the mansion's curved staircase, wearing a midnight blue gown that took Rai's breath away. She'd learned to walk the fine line between appropriate elegance and suspicious extravagance, choosing pieces that were beautiful but not so obviously expensive as to raise questions about her supposed financial situation. "You look incredible," Rai whispered, kissing her cheek as camera flashes captured the moment for society pages. "Thank you," Simone replied, though her smile felt strained. These events were torture, surrounded by people she'd known her entire life, pretending to be someone else while they unknowingly played along with her charade. "Simone, dear," Jennifer appeared at her elbow with 2 young women in tow. "I'd like you to meet Isabella Worthington and Victoria Sterling. They're both so accomplished. Isabella just finished her master's at Harvard Business School, and Victoria speaks 6 languages fluently." The introduction was calculated cruelty. Both women were from prominent families, both had pursued Rai before his engagement, and both represented everything Jennifer thought her son should want: pedigreed wealth with no secrets. "How wonderful," Simone said graciously, though inwardly she noted the irony. She spoke 7 languages and held dual degrees from Oxford and the Sorbonne, credentials that dwarfed both women's accomplishments. "And what do you do, Simone?" Isabella asked with barely concealed condescension. "I'm finishing my degree at Stanford." "In what field?" Victoria pressed. "Literature and international relations." "How practical," Isabella sniffed. Jennifer watched with satisfaction as the conversation grew increasingly uncomfortable. She'd positioned photographers nearby to capture Simone's obvious discomfort among her social betters. "Ladies, if you'll excuse us," Rai intervened, sensing his fiancée's distress. "I'd like to introduce Simone to some of our major donors." As they moved away, Jennifer's smile turned predatory. Phase 1 of her plan was complete, establishing that Simone didn't belong. Phase 2 would be far more devastating. Throughout the evening, Jennifer orchestrated a series of subtle humiliations. She accidentally spilled wine near Simone's gown, then made a great show of concern. She introduced Simone to art dealers and cultural critics with questions designed to expose her supposed lack of refinement. "This Picasso is from his blue period, isn't it fascinating?" Jennifer gestured toward a painting worth millions. "Actually," Simone corrected gently, "it's from his rose period. You can tell by the warmer palette and the subject matter." Jennifer's eyes flashed with irritation. How did a scholarship student know more about art than she did? The evening's coup de grace came during the auction. Jennifer had arranged for several items to be presented with deliberately incorrect information, testing whether Simone would reveal knowledge she shouldn't possess. "Our next item is a vintage Cartier necklace from 1925, the auctioneer announced, though Jennifer knew it was actually from 1932. Simone bit her tongue, recognizing the piece from her own family's collection of similar Cartier designs. She'd worn nearly identical pieces to state dinners. "Lovely piece," Jennifer commented loudly. "Though I believe the auction house has the date wrong. That's clearly from the 1930s, not the 1920s. The mounting style is distinctly Art Deco rather than Art Nouveau." Simone nodded automatically. "Yes, probably 1932 based on the geometric patterns in the setting." The words were out before she could stop them. Jennifer's trap had worked perfectly. "My goodness," Jennifer exclaimed. "How do you know so much about vintage jewelry?" "That's quite specialized knowledge for a literature student." I read about it," Simone stammered, realizing her mistake too late. "Read about it? Where?" "That's the kind of information you typically only get from handling pieces personally or studying under experts." Rai looked between his mother and fiancé, confusion clouding his features. "Simone?" "I find jewelry design fascinating," Simone said weakly. Jennifer pressed her advantage. "Fascinating enough to recognize specific mounting techniques from particular years? That's professional-level expertise, dear." The conversation was attracting attention from nearby guests. Simone felt trapped, exposed, like a butterfly pinned to a display board. "Perhaps we should discuss this later," Rai suggested, sensing the tension. "Of course," Jennifer agreed sweetly. "I'm just so impressed by your fiancé's hidden depths." The phrase hung in the air like an accusation. 3 weeks later, Jennifer's master plan reached its climax. She'd spent a fortune hiring professional actors to pose as wealthy businessmen and creating elaborate scenarios designed to frame Simone for infidelity. The setup was diabolical in its simplicity. The actors approached Simone at an art gallery opening, pretending to mistake her for someone else before launching into conversations about business opportunities and investment strategies. Hidden cameras captured every interaction from angles that suggested intimacy and secret dealing. "Mr. Peterson, I think you have me confused with someone else," Simone said politely as the first actor handed her his business card. "My apologies, Miss Manuel. I mean, Miss Harris," the actor replied, using the name confusion Jennifer had scripted. "You just reminded me so much of someone I know in the financial sector." The mistake was designed to suggest Simone had multiple identities, multiple names she used in different contexts. Similar scenes played out over several weeks, actors approaching her at bookstores, restaurants, even the university library. Each interaction was carefully choreographed to appear compromising when taken out of context. "Look at these photographs." Jennifer presented the evidence to her son with tears in her eyes. "She's been meeting with wealthy men behind your back. The investigators say she's building relationships as backup plans." Rai stared at the photos, his world tilting on its axis. The images showed Simone accepting business cards, engaged in what appeared to be intimate conversations with strange men, even laughing with them in ways that seemed flirtatious. "Who are these men?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Investment brokers, venture capitalists, real estate developers, all very wealthy, all very married." Jennifer's voice carried the perfect note of regretful concern. "I'm so sorry, darling. I hoped I was wrong about her. There has to be an explanation." "What explanation could there be? She's systematically building a network of wealthy contacts while engaged to you. This isn't coincidence, Rai. This is strategy." The final piece of Jennifer's web came from the fabricated financial investigation. She presented Rai with documents that appeared to show Simone had been researching his family's assets, his business holdings, even his trust fund details. "She knows everything about your financial situation," Jennifer said sadly. "More than you've ever told her. How do you think she obtained this information?" The evidence was overwhelming, professionally manufactured, and completely convincing. Jennifer had learned from previous mistakes. This time, she'd created a narrative so airtight that even Rai's love couldn't find cracks in it. That night, Rai confronted his fiancée in their bedroom. The photographs spread across their bed like accusations. "I know what you're doing," he said, his voice cold with hurt and fury. Simone looked at the images with genuine confusion. "What are these? Who are these men?" "Stop lying," Rai exploded. "I have photos. I have evidence. You've been building relationships with wealthy men while planning our wedding. Tell me, was any of it real? Did you ever love me? Or was this just the longest con in history?" "Rai, I don't understand. The secret meetings, the mysterious knowledge about art and jewelry, the way you seem to know things you shouldn't know. You're not who you pretended to be, are you?" The irony was devastating. He was absolutely right, but for completely wrong reasons. "You think I'm cheating on you?" Simone whispered, her heart shattering. "I think you've been using me from the beginning. I think you studied my family, learned what kind of woman I'd fall for, and became her perfectly." Simone stood frozen as the man she loved accused her of the very deception she was actually guilty of, while simultaneously absolving her of crimes she'd never committed. "You want me to leave?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I want you to tell me the truth. All of it. Who are you really, and what do you want from me?" For a moment, Simone almost broke. She almost told him everything. About her father's empire, about the elaborate charade, about how she'd fallen so deeply in love that she'd forgotten it was supposed to be temporary. But his accusing tone, his obvious belief in his mother's lies, stopped her. If he could think her capable of such betrayal, if he could believe she was a calculating gold digger despite 2 years of devotion, then he'd never really known her at all. "I want a divorce," she said quietly. "Fine," Rai replied, his own heart breaking even as he spoke the words. "My lawyers will draw up the papers." As Simone packed her belongings that night, she found the engagement ring Rai had given her with such hope and joy. The modest diamond had meant more to her than the crown jewels because it represented his love, not his wealth. She left it on the dresser with a note. "Thank you for showing me what love feels like, even if it wasn't real for you." Jennifer Benjamin stood at her bedroom window, watching Simone's taxi disappear into the night. She'd won, as she always did. Her son was safe from the fortune hunter who would have destroyed him. What she didn't know was that in her victory, she'd achieved something far worse than anything Simone could have done. She'd destroyed her son's capacity to trust, taught him to see deception where only love existed, and robbed him of the greatest treasure he would ever find. The greatest tragedies aren't born from evil intentions, but from good people who mistake shadows for monsters and destroy the very light they're trying to protect. Chapter 4. The Cruel Divorce. Revenge tastes sweetest when served to those who deserve it least, but the universe has a twisted sense of humor about who truly deserves what. The law offices of Hartwell, Kingston and Associates occupied the 42nd floor of a gleaming downtown tower, their conference room windows offering a panoramic view of San Francisco Bay that seemed to mock the destruction unfolding within. Ry Benjamin sat across from his soon-to-be ex-wife, his face a mask of cold satisfaction as his attorney spread divorce papers across the mahogany table like weapons of war. "As you can see, Mrs. Benjamin," attorney Richard Hartwell addressed Simone with professional detachment, "Mr. Benjamin is offering you a settlement of $50,000 and 60 days to vacate the marital residence." Simone Manuel, who could have bought the entire law firm with a single wire transfer, stared at the papers in stunned silence. The amount was insulting, deliberately so, but what cut deeper was the cruelty behind it. 50,000, she repeated quietly, for 2 years of marriage. More than generous, considering the circumstances, Ry said coldly, his green eyes holding none of the warmth that had once made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. "My client has been exceptionally fair, given your behavior." Simone's attorney, a young public defender named David Chen, whom she'd hired to maintain her facade, shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we could discuss a more equitable distribution." "There's nothing to discuss," Ry interrupted. "She gets what I'm offering, or she gets nothing." "Nothing," Simone echoed, the word tasting like ashes in her mouth. "That's right. You picked the wrong mark, sweetheart." The endearment dripped with venom. "Did you really think I was stupid enough to leave myself vulnerable to a gold digger?" Jennifer Benjamin, seated beside her son like a general surveying a conquered battlefield, allowed herself a small smile of triumph. "I tried to warn him about you from the beginning. A mother knows." "You don't know anything about me," Simone said softly, speaking directly to Jennifer for the first time. "I know enough. I know you're not who you pretended to be. I know you targeted my son for his wealth. I know you've been meeting secretly with other wealthy men. And I know," Ry added with brutal precision, "that this whole act, the sweet, grateful poor girl routine, was just that, an act." Simone felt something die inside her chest. Not her love for him, that would prove harder to kill, but her hope that the man she'd married still existed somewhere beneath the bitterness and suspicion. "If that's what you believe," she said with dignity that impressed even Hartwell, "then there's nothing left to discuss." What none of them knew was that 3 days earlier, Ry's attempt to transfer his assets to his mother's name had failed spectacularly. A simple clerical error in the legal documentation, a missing signature on page 47 of the transfer documents, had left everything in his name. His lawyers, rushing to complete the paperwork before the divorce proceedings, had assured him the transfer was complete without properly verifying the filing. The Benjamin fortune remained entirely vulnerable to California's community property laws. "Shall we proceed to the courthouse?" Hartwell suggested. "Judge Coleman is waiting." The San Francisco Superior Court felt like a mausoleum as they took their places before Judge Patricia Coleman, a stern woman in her 60s who'd presided over more messy divorces than she cared to count. She reviewed the preliminary paperwork with the weary expression of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human greed and betrayal. "Before we proceed with asset division," Judge Coleman announced, California law requires me to read the complete financial disclosures from both parties. Rye leaned back in his chair with confident satisfaction. He'd planned this moment carefully, wanting Simone to understand exactly how thoroughly she'd been outmaneuvered. "Mr. Benjamin," he whispered to his lawyer, "make sure she hears every word. I want her to know exactly what she's losing." Mr. Benjamin's disclosed assets. Judge Coleman began reading from the court documents, her voice echoing in the hushed courtroom. Include primary ownership of Benjamin Luxury Jewelers, valued at approximately $400 million. Additional holdings include investment portfolios totaling $200 million, liquid assets of $120 million, and real property valued at $127 million. Ray's confident expression began to falter. Those numbers represented his entire fortune, assets that should have been safely transferred to his mother's name. Total disclosed assets for Mr. Benjamin, approximately $847 million. The blood drained from Rye's face. His lawyer was frantically shuffling through papers, searching for the transfer documents that should have protected their client's wealth. "Your Honor," Hartwell interrupted desperately, "there may be an error in the filing. Mr. Benjamin's assets were transferred prior to these proceedings." "I'm reading directly from the verified financial disclosure documents filed with this court," Judge Coleman replied sternly. "The assets listed are those currently held in Mr. Benjamin's name as of the filing date." Jennifer Benjamin grabbed her son's arm, her own face pale with shock. "How is this possible?" she hissed. But the judge wasn't finished. "Now, regarding Mrs. Benjamin's disclosed assets." Rye barely heard the words at first, still reeling from the revelation that his entire fortune was about to be cut in half. Then the numbers began to register. Trust funds established in her name totaling $4.2 billion. The courtroom fell completely silent, except for the sound of Rye's lawyer's pen hitting the floor. Direct holdings in Manuel Communications, preferred stock, valued at $1.8 billion. Rye's head began to spin. Manuel Communications? The media empire? Additional investment portfolios managed by Goldman Sachs, totaling $600 million. Furthermore, Judge Coleman continued relentlessly, Mrs. Benjamin is listed as the sole heir and daughter of David Manuel, chairman and CEO of Manuel Communications Empire. The silence that followed was deafening. Rye stared at the woman he'd just accused of being a gold digger, the woman he'd mockingly offered $50,000, the woman who was apparently worth more than most small countries. David Manuel, the media titan whose influence shaped global entertainment and news. The billionaire who dined with presidents and had been featured on the cover of Forbes 17 times. The man so powerful that world leaders sought his counsel on international affairs. Total disclosed assets for Mrs. Benjamin, the judge concluded, approximately $12.6 billion. Rye's world didn't just shift, it exploded. Every assumption he'd made, every accusation he'd hurled, every moment of smugness and superiority crumbled into dust. The woman he'd thought was a fortune hunter had been slumming it with him. "Simone," he whispered, his voice barely audible. She stood with the same grace she'd shown throughout their marriage, though tears now flowed freely down her cheeks. "Your Honor," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned courtroom, "I formally renounce any claim to my husband's assets. I want nothing from Mr. Benjamin's estate." "Mrs. Benjamin," Judge Coleman said gently, "you should understand that under California law, you're entitled to half of all marital assets." "I understand, Your Honor, but money has never meant anything to me without love, and apparently I never had that anyway." She turned to face Rye directly for the first time since entering the courtroom. The pain in her eyes was staggering. "You want to know who I really am," she said, her voice growing stronger. I'm the woman who gave up $12 billion worth of lifestyle to work in a coffee shop because I wanted to be loved for myself, not my inheritance. I'm the woman who lied about being poor because I was terrified that wealth would blind you to who I really was inside. The courtroom was completely silent, everyone hanging on her every word. I'm the woman who spent 2 years being grateful for your love, never realizing that you were only capable of loving someone you thought was beneath you. I'm the woman who discovered that her husband's trust was so fragile that a few photographs and her mother-in-law's suspicions could destroy it completely. Rai tried to speak, but she held up her hand. Most of all, I'm the woman who learned that all the money in the world can't buy the one thing I wanted most. A husband who believed in her character more than he believed in lies. Simone, please, no, she said firmly. You made your choice when you decided I was guilty without trial. You chose to believe I was a liar and a cheat rather than simply asking me to explain. That tells me everything I need to know about your love. Judge Coleman, who'd presided over thousands of divorces, had never seen anything quite like this. Mrs. Benjamin, are you certain about renouncing your claim? This is an enormous amount of money. Your Honor, I've learned that being rich without love makes you poorer than having nothing with someone who truly knows your heart. With that, Simone signed the divorce papers with a steady hand, each signature severing not just legal bonds, but the dream she'd built around a future with the man she'd thought was her soulmate. As she walked toward the courtroom exit, Rai finally found his voice. Simone, wait, let me explain. She paused without turning around. Explain what? That you never trusted me? That you believed I was capable of betrayal? That you thought so little of my character that a few photographs convinced you I was unfaithful? I was manipulated. My mother. Your mother showed you lies, and you chose to believe them over me. That's not manipulation, Rai. That's choice. The courtroom doors closed behind her with a finality that echoed through Rai's soul. In less than an hour, he'd lost the love of his life, discovered she was one of the wealthiest women in the world, and realized that he'd thrown away paradise because he was too proud and too foolish to see the treasure he'd been holding. Jennifer Benjamin sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd destroyed. She hadn't saved her son from a fortune hunter. She'd robbed him of a woman whose love was worth more than all their jewels combined. Outside the courthouse, Simone stood in the California sunshine, truly alone for the first time in her life. Her limousine waited at the curb, her father's security team maintaining respectful distance, but the luxury felt hollow after years of genuine simplicity. She pulled out her phone to call her father, then hesitated. Once she made that call, Simone Harris would disappear forever, and Simone Manuel would reclaim her throne in a world where love was just another commodity to be bought and sold. But some mistakes are too magnificent to forgive quickly, and some loves too deep to die easily, even when they should. Chapter 5. The Shocking Revelation. The most expensive education money can buy is learning that everything you thought you knew about someone was a reflection of everything you didn't know about yourself. Rai Benjamin sat in his empty mansion for 72 hours after the divorce, surrounded by luxury that now felt like a mausoleum. The silence was deafening. No sound of Simone's laughter echoing through the halls, no gentle humming as she arranged flowers, no soft footsteps that had made this house feel like home instead of just an expensive showcase. The media explosion began within hours of the court proceedings. Hidden heiress renounces fortune in shocking divorce screamed across every entertainment and business publication. Photos of Simone that Rai had never seen before flooded social media. Images of her at state dinners, charity galas, and cultural events where she belonged to a world so far above his own that he felt dizzy contemplating it. Mr. Benjamin? His assistant, Margaret, knocked tentatively on his study door. The reporters are still outside, and your phone hasn't stopped ringing. Tell them all to go to hell, Rye muttered, staring at a Forbes article featuring David Manuel on the cover. The headline read, "The King of Media, How David Manuel Built an Empire That Shapes Global Culture." Margaret hesitated. "Sir, there's something else. I found a box of Mrs. Benjamin's belongings that she left behind. I thought you might want to burn it." "Sir?" "Just leave it on my desk." When Margaret departed, Rye approached the box like it might explode. Inside were remnants of the life they'd shared. Books with her marginalia, photos from their simple dates, ticket stubs from movies they'd watched in cheap theaters. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was her journal. Ray's hands trembled as he opened to the first entry, dated 3 years earlier. "I did it. I actually did it. I told Stanford admissions my name is Simone Harris, and they believed me. Daddy thinks I'm crazy, but I need to know what it feels like to be loved for myself, not for the Manuel name. Maybe I'll meet someone who sees me, really sees me, without dollar signs in their eyes." The journal chronicled her elaborate deception, but not the kind Jennifer had imagined. Instead of a gold digger's calculations, Rye found the desperate hopes of a woman trapped by her own wealth. "I met someone today, Rye Benjamin. He has the most beautiful smile, and when he talks about his dreams, his whole face lights up. I wanted to tell him who I really am, but then he mentioned how refreshing it is to meet someone real for once. How can I tell him I'm the least real person he'll ever encounter?" Entry after entry revealed her internal struggle. "Rye thinks he's protecting me by paying for dinner, and I let him because it makes him feel strong. He has no idea that my daily trust fund interest could buy the restaurant. I love watching him plan our future together, thinking he needs to work hard to give me a good life. If only he knew I could give him anything he's ever dreamed of." The entry, dated 6 months into their relationship, made Rye's chest tighten. "I think I love him. No, I know I love him, not because he takes care of me, I've never needed taking care of, but because he sees something in me that has nothing to do with money or power. When he looks at me, I feel like I'm enough just as I am. I've never felt that before." Rye turned the page with growing horror at his own blindness. "Jennifer Benjamin hates me, and I understand why. She's protecting her son from what she thinks is a fortune hunter. The irony is almost funny. If she knew how much fortune I'm hiding, she'd probably have a heart attack. Maybe someday we'll all laugh about this misunderstanding." But the entry that destroyed him completely was dated just 1 week before their final fight. "I've decided to tell Rye everything. 3 years of marriage have proven that his love is real, deeper than anything money could buy. I'm going to show him the manor house, introduce him to Daddy, let him see the real world I come from. He might be angry at first about the deception, but then he'll understand why I did it. My darling Rye loves surprises, and this will be the biggest surprise of his life. I can't wait to see his face when he realizes his poor little wife could actually buy him a dozen jewelry stores." The journal fell from Rye's hands as the full magnitude of his betrayal crashed over him. She had been planning to tell him the truth the very day he accused her of lying. While he was believing Jennifer's fabricated evidence, Simone was preparing to trust him with her most dangerous secret. His phone rang, jarring him from his devastation. The caller ID showed his business manager. "Rye, we need to talk. Something strange is happening with your accounts." "What do you mean?" "Several of your major investments have been mysteriously profitable over the past 2 years. Deals that should have failed somehow succeeded. Contracts that seemed impossible to secure materialized at the last minute. I've been investigating and what? The backing came from shell companies that I've now traced to Manuel Communications subsidiaries. Your wife, ex-wife, has been secretly supporting your business for years." Rai closed his eyes, the pieces of a devastating puzzle falling into place. How much? Conservative estimate? She's probably responsible for about 60% of your company's growth since your marriage. Without her hidden support, Benjamin Jewelers would have been struggling to stay afloat. The woman he'd accused of being a gold digger had been quietly making him golden. That evening, Rai drove aimlessly through the city until he found himself outside the Manuel estate for the first time. The massive iron gates bore the family crest he now recognized from business magazines, a soaring eagle clutching a golden globe symbolizing the family's reach across continents. The security guard emerged from a booth that looked more like a small palace. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm Rai Benjamin. I need to see Simone." The guard's expression shifted to barely concealed hostility. "I'm sorry, sir. Ms. Manuel is not receiving visitors. Please, just tell her I need to apologize." "Sir, I have explicit instructions." "Then let me wait. I'll wait here until she agrees to see me." For 6 hours, Rai sat in his car outside those gates, watching the sun set over an estate that made his family's mansion look like a cottage. Luxury vehicles came and went, diplomats, celebrities, business leaders whose faces he recognized from international news. This was Simone's real world, and he finally understood how far she'd fallen to be with him. At midnight, the gates opened and Simone emerged, looking ethereal in a simple white dress that probably cost more than his car. But it wasn't the dress that stopped his breath. It was the sadness in her eyes, a weariness that made her look older than her 24 years. "What do you want, Rai?" "To apologize, to explain, to beg for forgiveness." She studied his face for a long moment, and he saw a flicker of the woman who'd once loved him desperately. "Apologize for which part?" she asked quietly. "For believing I was a liar? For laughing while you destroyed our marriage? Or for never once asking me to explain before you condemned me?" "All of it. Everything." "Simone, I was wrong about everything." "You weren't wrong about everything," she said with devastating honesty. "You were right about one thing. I did lie to you. Every single day for 3 years, I lied about who I was. Maybe we're both liars, Rai. Maybe we deserve each other." "No," he said desperately. "You lied to protect yourself. I believed lies because I wanted to." "Why?" The question came out like a sob. "Why did you want to believe the worst about me?" Rai searched for an answer and found only ugly truth. "Because it was easier than admitting I wasn't good enough for you. Because believing you were beneath me felt safer than acknowledging you were beyond me." Simone wrapped her arms around herself, as if protecting against a chill only she could feel. "Do you know what the saddest part is? I gave up everything to be someone you could love. I traded palaces for apartments, galas for coffee shops, my real identity for a fantasy of normal love. And in the end, you couldn't even love the lie I created for you. I did love you. I do love you. You loved the idea of saving someone. You loved feeling superior and generous and needed. But you never loved me, Rai, because you never knew me. And when the image didn't fit anymore, you threw me away like a broken toy." The words hit him like physical blows because they contained too much truth to deny. "How much time do you need?" he asked quietly. Simone's laugh was bitter as winter rain. "Time? You think this is about time? Rai, you chose to believe I was capable of betrayal rather than simply asking me what was happening. You chose your mother's lies over your wife's character. That's not a mistake that time can fix." "Then what can fix it?" She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the woman she really was. Not the grateful scholarship student he'd thought he married, not the calculating fortune hunter his mother had painted her as, but a brilliant, powerful woman who'd given up everything for love and received suspicion in return. "I don't know if anything can," she said finally. "I thought love meant believing in someone even when things looked bad." I thought marriage meant choosing to trust your partner over everyone else. I was wrong about what you believed love meant. Simone, go home, Rai. Go back to your mother and your suspicions and your comfortable assumptions about who deserves what. You got exactly what you wanted. A wife who can't hurt you because she's not there anymore. She turned to walk back through the gates, then paused without facing him. For what it's worth, I really did love you. Not your money, not your status, not your family's approval. I loved the man who held my hand in that diner and promised to spend his life making me happy. But I'm starting to think that man was just another beautiful lie. The gates closed with a finality that echoed through Rai's soul, leaving him to face the most expensive truth he'd ever encountered. He'd thrown away a love worth $12 billion because he'd been too poor in spirit to recognize its value. Chapter 6. The First Desperate Attempt. Desperation makes poets of ordinary men and fools of brilliant ones, but love makes both poetry and foolishness feel like the only rational responses to an irrational world. 3 months after the divorce, San Francisco woke to find the city transformed into a canvas of regret. Billboards stretched across highways, building sides and bus stops, all carrying the same message in bold letters against stark white backgrounds. Simone, I was wrong. Please come home. Rai. The campaign had cost Rai Benjamin $2 million and every favor he could call in with advertising agencies. From the Golden Gate Bridge to the financial district, from Stanford University to the marina, his apology dominated the skyline like a prayer written across the heavens. Sir, the media is calling it the Billboard Apology Campaign, Margaret informed him as he stood in his office, staring out at one of his messages visible across the bay. Entertainment Tonight wants an interview and— No interviews, Rai said quietly. This isn't about publicity. It's about reaching her. But Simone's response came through her publicist within hours. Ms. Manuel appreciates Mr. Benjamin's advertising creativity, but prefers her privacy respected. The formality of the statement cut deeper than outright rejection. She was treating him like a stranger, like someone whose desperation was merely an inconvenience to be managed by professional handlers. Undeterred, Rai escalated. His second attempt came 2 weeks later during the lunch rush in downtown San Francisco. 300 dancers emerged simultaneously from subway stations, office buildings, and street corners, moving in perfect synchronization to spell out, "Forgive me, Simone," in human letters across Union Square. The flash mob video went viral within hours, garnering millions of views and trending on every social platform. But the only view that mattered came from the 42nd floor of the Manuel Communications building, where security cameras captured Simone watching from her office window, her hand pressed against the glass. She never came down. She saw it, Rai told his friend Marcus over drinks that evening. The security footage shows she watched the entire performance. But she didn't respond. Nothing. Not even through her publicist this time. Marcus, who'd known Rai since college, studied his friend's haggard appearance with concern. Maybe you should consider that she's moved on. She hasn't moved on, Rai said with certainty that surprised himself. If she'd moved on, she wouldn't have watched from her window. She would have closed the blinds and ignored it completely. His third attempt was more personal, more painful. Rai discovered that Simone volunteered at Sacred Heart Children's Hospital every Thursday evening, reading to young patients. He waited in the parking garage for 4 hours until she emerged, exhaustion clear in every line of her body. Simone. She turned, and for a moment he saw surprise replace the careful composure she'd maintained since the divorce. "You're following me now?" she asked wearily. "I needed to see you. To explain what?" Her voice carried 3 months of accumulated pain. "That you spent our entire marriage thinking so little of me, that when your mother showed you lies, you believed them instantly, that you never once asked for my side of the story." I was jealous and insecure. I know that sounds pathetic, but jealous? Simone's composure finally cracked. Of what? I gave you everything. I gave up my identity, my family, my entire world to be with you. I worked in that coffee shop and lived in that apartment because I wanted to be worthy of your love, not the other way around. The raw pain in her voice stopped him cold. Other people in the parking garage had turned to stare, but neither of them cared. I never asked you to give up anything, Rai said desperately. You didn't have to ask. Don't you understand? I loved you so much that I became someone else entirely, someone I thought you could love without reservation. And even then, even when I made myself small enough to fit into your world, you still found reasons to doubt me. Tears flowed freely now, and Rai felt his heart breaking all over again. The saddest part, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, is that you never saw the real me anyway. You fell in love with your idea of a grateful poor girl who needed rescuing. When that image didn't fit anymore, you threw me away. She walked toward her car, a modest Honda she drove to maintain her cover, though Rai now knew her garage contained vehicles worth more than his entire business. Simone, please. She turned back one final time, and the look in her eyes was devastating. I don't miss Rai Benjamin the millionaire, she said softly. I miss the man who held my hand in that diner and told me his dreams, but I'm starting to think that man never really existed. I think he was just another role you played, the humble, genuine guy who was really just slumming it with someone he thought was beneath him. The accusation hit like a physical blow because it contained enough truth to wound. Had he unconsciously enjoyed feeling superior? Had some part of him relished being the wealthy benefactor to her struggling student? That's not true, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? When you introduced me to your friends, how did you describe me? As your brilliant, accomplished girlfriend, or as the poor scholarship student you were helping? Rai opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. The horrible truth was that he had described her that way, had taken unconscious pride in his own generosity. I thought so, Simone said sadly. Goodbye, Rai. This time, when she drove away, Rai didn't follow. He stood in that parking garage for another hour, facing the uncomfortable truth about his own motivations. Had he loved Simone? Or had he loved the story he'd told himself about loving her? His fourth attempt came 6 weeks later. Through careful research, he'd learned that Simone's favorite author, Elena Ferrante, was doing a rare reading at City Light's bookstore. He arrived 2 hours early, claiming a seat in the back row and praying she would come. When Simone entered, elegant in a simple black coat, she saw him immediately. For a moment, he thought she might leave. Instead, she took a seat in the front row and listened to the entire reading without acknowledging his presence. The author read from her latest novel about women's friendship and betrayal, and every word seemed to echo the themes of trust and deception that had destroyed their marriage. When the reading ended, Rai approached with a first edition of My Brilliant Friend that had cost him 3 months' salary. I remember you mentioning this was your favorite novel, he said hopefully. Simone looked at the book, then at him, and he saw something shift in her expression, not softening, but a kind of resigned sadness. I have this edition already, she said gently. My father gave it to me for my 16th birthday, along with signed copies of everything Ferrante had written at that point. The reminder of everything he'd never known about her real life hit like a slap. David Manuel had probably met Elena Ferrante personally, had probably commissioned those signed copies as easily as Rai might order flowers. Keep it anyway, she said, not unkindly. Maybe someday you'll read it and understand why I loved it so much. Why did you love it? Simone was quiet for a moment, then looked directly into his eyes for the first time since the divorce. It's about a woman who loses herself trying to become what she thinks someone else wants her to be. It's about friendship and betrayal and the terrible things we do to ourselves for love. She paused. It's about discovering that the person you trusted most never really knew you at all. With that, she walked away, leaving Rai holding a book that now felt like an indictment of everything he'd failed to understand about the woman he'd married. Standing outside City Light's bookstore, watching her disappear into the San Francisco night, Rai finally began to comprehend the magnitude of what he'd lost. Simone Manuel wasn't just wealthy, she was extraordinary, brilliant, compassionate, powerful enough to shape the world, yet humble enough to serve coffee. She had chosen him over presidents and princes, had given up a throne to sit beside him in diners, and he had thrown it all away because he was too insecure to believe he deserved such a miracle. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop embarrassing yourself. She's moved on. A friend." Rai stared at the message, wondering if it was true. Had Simone found someone worthy of her love, someone who wouldn't mistake her kindness for weakness or her trust for deception? The thought of another man holding her, loving her, appreciating the treasure Rai had carelessly discarded, filled him with a rage and despair so profound he could barely breathe. But perhaps that was what he deserved. Perhaps this was justice, to lose the most precious thing in his life and spend forever knowing it was his own fault. The cruelest punishment for a man who mistakes diamonds for stones is to spend eternity recognizing brilliance only after he's thrown it away. Chapter 7. The Deeper Fall. Pride, they say, comes before the fall, but sometimes the fall comes before the wisdom, and wisdom comes only after you've learned to crawl through the wreckage of everything you thought you knew about love. 6 months after the Billboard campaign, Rai Benjamin's world had contracted to the size of his regrets. His business, stripped of Simone's secret support, hemorrhaged money like a severed artery. The Benjamin jewelry empire that had taken 3 generations to build was crumbling in real time, and the society pages that had once celebrated his success now chronicled his spectacular decline with gleeful precision. "Mr. Benjamin," his accountant delivered the monthly report with the enthusiasm of a funeral director. "We're looking at another 12% drop in revenue. The Worthington account pulled out yesterday, and the Sterling family has requested their pieces be appraised for insurance purposes, usually a prelude to selling." Rai nodded absently, staring at the latest gossip column headline. "From billionaire heiress to better prospects, Simone Manuel spotted with European royalty." The accompanying photos showed Simone at a Vienna charity gala, radiant in emerald silk, laughing with Prince Alessandro of Austria. She looked like she belonged in that world of crowns and titles. Because she did. She'd always belonged there, and Rai was finally understanding how far she'd stooped to love him. His 5th attempt at reconciliation had been born from this realization. If grand gestures weren't working, perhaps humble truth would. He'd written her a letter, pouring his heart onto paper with the desperation of a dying man writing his final confession. "Dearest Simone, I know I have no right to your attention, but I need you to know that discovering who you really are made me realize I never knew myself at all. You are magnificent, not because of your wealth, but because you chose love over safety. You risked everything to be with someone you thought was beneath your station, while I couldn't even trust the woman I claimed to adore. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for another chance because I haven't earned it. I just want you to know that losing you taught me what love actually means. Forever yours, even if you're no longer mine. Rai." Her response had come through lawyers. "Ms. Manuel requests that Mr. Benjamin cease all contact. Further attempts at communication will be considered harassment." "She won't even read my letters anymore," Rai confessed to his father during one of their increasingly frequent conversations about the family business's decline. Harold Benjamin, aged a decade in 6 months, poured himself another scotch, a habit that had developed alongside his son's heartbreak. Can you blame her? You accuse that girl of terrible things, Rye. Things that would be unforgivable to someone with her pride. Her pride? She's the one who lied for 3 years. She lied about her bank account, not her heart. There's a difference. The words stung because they came from his father, the man whose approval Rye had spent his life seeking. Harold Benjamin had been quietly investigating Simone's true background, and what he'd discovered had left him ashamed of his family's treatment of her. "Do you know what I learned about your ex-wife?" Harold continued. "She's been anonymously funding children's hospitals across the country for years. She established scholarship programs for underprivileged students. She personally intervened to save 3 newspapers from bankruptcy because she believed in independent journalism. I don't want to hear about her charity work. You should, because it tells you who she really is. While you were accusing her of being a gold digger, she was giving away fortunes to people who needed help. While your mother was calling her a manipulator, she was using her power to make the world better." Harold's voice grew harder. "That girl loved you enough to give up billions of dollars in lifestyle, and you loved her so little that you believed lies about her character." The business continued its death spiral. Former friends distanced themselves when they learned Rye had divorced the Manuel heiress. Social invitations dried up. Investment opportunities vanished. The man who'd once been considered one of San Francisco's most eligible bachelors was now seen as the fool who'd thrown away the catch of the century. "Perhaps we should consider bankruptcy," Harold suggested during their emergency board meeting. "No," Rye said firmly. "I'll figure something out." But the solutions were limited and humiliating. Rye found himself selling family heirlooms, pieces that had been passed down for generations. Each transaction felt like amputating part of his identity, but pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. The 6th attempt came during the San Francisco Symphony's gala performance, an event Simone attended as a board member. Rye had purchased a ticket he couldn't afford, hoping to speak with her during intermission. He found her in the lobby, surrounded by admirers, and looking every inch the queen she'd been born to be. Her gown was midnight blue silk that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and diamonds sparkled at her throat, real diamonds, not the costume jewelry she'd worn during their marriage to maintain her disguise. "Simone!" he called out as she passed near his section. She turned, and for a moment their eyes met across the crowded lobby. The recognition was instant, as was the pain that flashed across her features before her mask of composure slipped back into place. "Mr. Benjamin," she acknowledged him with the polite distance one might show a casual acquaintance. The formality was like a knife to his chest. "Could we talk? Just for a moment?" "I don't think that would be appropriate. Please, 5 minutes." The people around them had begun to notice the exchange, recognizing both participants in San Francisco's most talked-about divorce. Simone clearly wanted to avoid a scene. 5 minutes, she agreed quietly, but not here. They found a quiet alcove near the Symphony Hall's administrative offices, away from the crowd's curious stares. Standing close to her for the first time in months, Rye was overwhelmed by familiar sensations, her subtle perfume, the way she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, the quiet strength that radiated from her like warmth from a fire. "You look beautiful," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Thank you," she replied formally. "You wanted to say something?" "I wanted to apologize, again. I know the billboards and the flash mob were probably embarrassing." "They were desperate," she corrected, "and public, and completely missing the point." "Then tell me what the point is. Help me understand how to fix this." Simone was quiet for a long moment, studying his face as if searching for something she'd lost. "The point, Rye, is that you believed I was capable of betrayal. Not because of evidence, but because your mother told you to. The point is that after 2 years of marriage, you trusted a few photographs more than you trusted my character. She's my mother. I've trusted her my whole life. And I was your wife. Didn't that count for anything? The question hung between them like an indictment. Around them, the symphony's intermission was ending, and guests were returning to their seats. It counted for everything, Rai said desperately. You were everything to me. No, Simone said sadly. I was your project, your charity case, the poor girl you rescued who made you feel generous and important, but you never saw me as your equal, never respected me enough to defend me when I was attacked. That's not true. When your mother questioned my integrity, did you stand up for me? When she implied I was a liar and a user, did you tell her she was wrong? Or did you start watching me for signs that she might be right? Rai's silence was answer enough. I thought love meant believing in someone even when circumstances looked bad, Simone continued. I thought marriage meant choosing to trust your partner over everyone else, including your family. I was wrong about what those words meant to you. The symphony's second half was beginning, and Simone needed to return to her seat. I have to go, she said. When can I see you again? You can't, she replied with finality that felt like a door slamming shut. I'm not the woman you married, Rai. She never existed, and you're not the man I fell in love with either. Maybe we were both in love with illusions. As she walked away, Rai called out desperately, I know who you are now. I know you're David Manuel's daughter. I know about your fortune. I know about everything you gave up. Simone stopped but didn't turn around. Now you know my bank balance, she said quietly. But you still don't know my heart. And after what you did to it, I'm not sure anyone ever will again. The symphony hall doors closed behind her, leaving Rai alone in the lobby as the haunting strains of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 1. Two drifted through the walls, a piece about love and loss that seemed composed specifically for his torment. That night, Rai sat in his study reading business reports about Manuel Communications' latest acquisitions. Simone's company had just purchased 3 struggling newspapers to keep them in operation, ensuring hundreds of journalists kept their jobs. She was literally saving livelihoods while he could barely save his own business. The contrast was devastating. She wielded billions to help others while he'd wielded suspicion to hurt the person who'd loved him most. His phone rang, Jennifer Benjamin, calling with false concern. Darling, I saw the news about the symphony. Please tell me you're not still chasing that girl. Don't, Rai said quietly. Don't what? Don't call her that girl. Her name is Simone Manuel, and she's worth more than our entire family will ever be. Rai, I'm done, Mother. Done with your advice, done with your protection, done with pretending that destroying my marriage was somehow for my own good. He hung up and stared at the latest society page photo of Simone dancing with European nobility, looking like the princess she'd always been. Every smile in those photos felt like evidence of a life moving forward without him, a future where his absence was just a footnote in her extraordinary story. Sometimes the hardest lesson love teaches is that wanting someone back isn't the same as deserving them. And sometimes the distance between those two truths is measured not in miles, but in the magnitude of mistakes that can never be undone. Chapter 8. The Impossible Task. The difference between loving someone and proving you love someone is often the difference between what makes you feel good and what actually serves them. And learning that distinction is where boys become men and men become worthy of the women they've lost. 1 year after the divorce, Rai Benjamin stood in the rain outside the Sacred Heart Community Center, watching through steamed windows as Simone read stories to a group of underprivileged children. She'd been volunteering here every Saturday for months, and he'd been watching from a distance, trying to understand the woman he'd never really known. Inside, 8-year-old Maria Rodriguez climbed into Simone's lap as she finished reading The Little Prince. and Rai saw his ex-wife's face transform with genuine joy. This wasn't the polished socialite from magazine covers or the mysterious scholarship student from their marriage. This was Simone in her purest form, sharing love without expecting anything in return. "She comes every week," said Father Michael, the elderly priest who ran the center, appearing beside Rai under the shelter's overhang. "Never misses, never seeks credit. Most of our wealthy donors want their names on plaques. She won't even let us thank her publicly." "How long have you known who I am?" Rai asked. "Since the second week you started showing up. The question is, why are you here?" Rai watched Simone help the children clean up their craft supplies, her designer clothes forgotten as she knelt on the floor to reach their level. "Because I'm trying to understand who she really is." "And what have you learned?" "That I never deserved her." Father Michael studied Rai's profile, noting the weight loss, the sleepless shadows under his eyes, the defeat that had replaced his former arrogance. "Maybe, but the man I knew a year ago would have said he deserved better than her. The fact that you're here, seeing what I'm seeing, suggests you've learned something valuable." "What's that?" "That love isn't about what you can get. It's about what you can give without keeping score." That afternoon, Rai made a decision that shocked even himself. He called an emergency board meeting for Benjamin Luxury Jewelers and announced his intention to liquidate the entire company. Liquidate? His board members stared at him as if he'd announced plans to become a monk. "Rai, this company has been in your family for 70 years, and it's brought nothing but misery for the past year," Rai replied calmly. "I'm selling everything, the stores, the inventory, the patents, the brand name, everything." "But why?" "Because I need to prove that money was never what mattered to me." The liquidation took 3 months and generated $340 million after debts and taxes. The business press called it corporate suicide. Society columnists speculated about mental breakdown, but Rai had never been more certain of anything in his life. He donated $200 million to the Simone Manuel Foundation for Financial Literacy, a program he'd discovered she'd established to teach young people about money management and business ethics. Another $100 million went to various children's charities she supported. The remaining $40 million he split between his father's retirement and a modest living allowance for himself. "You're living in a studio apartment now," Harold Benjamin observed when he visited his son's dramatically downsized life. "You gave away everything your grandfather built." "Grandpa built a business," Rai corrected. "I destroyed a marriage. Which do you think was more valuable?" The gesture made international news. "Millionaire gives away fortune to win back billionaire ex-wife" dominated headlines for weeks. But the person whose attention he'd hoped to capture remained conspicuously silent, until she didn't. Simone's response came through her publicist, but this time the message was personal. "Ms. Manuel acknowledges Mr. Benjamin's charitable contributions, but notes that philanthropy motivated by personal gain contradicts the spirit of genuine giving. She requests that he find worthier reasons for his generosity." The rejection was devastating precisely because it was accurate. Rai had given away his fortune to prove a point, not because he genuinely cared about the causes. Simone had seen through his gesture to the selfish motivation beneath it. His 7th attempt was smaller, more personal. He'd learned that Simone visited her mother's grave every month, always alone, always on the 15th. Evelyn Manuel had died when Simone was 12, and Rai realized this loss might explain her desperate need to feel truly loved, orphaned by death, and then betrayed by marriage. He waited respectfully at a distance in Cypress Lawn Cemetery, not approaching but simply being present. When Simone noticed him among the headstones, she didn't flee or call security. Instead, she finished her quiet conversation with her mother's memory, arranged fresh white roses, and walked slowly in his direction. "How long have you been watching me grieve?" she asked without anger, just exhaustion. "Today was the first time. I wanted to understand. I needed to know what shaped you." "Loneliness," she said simply. "Losing the person who loved me unconditionally shaped everything that came after." They stood together in the cemetery's peaceful quiet. Two people who'd once shared everything, now separated by an ocean of hurt and mistrust. "She would have liked you," Simone said eventually. "My mother, she had a gift for seeing people's true hearts. What would she see in mine?" Simone considered the question seriously. Potential, pain, a man who's finally asking the right questions but might be asking them too late. "Is it too late?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I loved you so much that I became someone else entirely. But I don't know if I can love someone who needed me to be less than I am to feel good about himself." "I never needed you to be less." "Didn't you?" she interrupted gently. "Be honest, Rai. When you thought I was poor, didn't it feel good to be the provider? When you thought I needed rescuing, didn't it make you feel important? When you introduced me as your scholarship student girlfriend, weren't you a little proud of your own generosity?" Rai opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again. The uncomfortable truth was that he had felt those things, had unconsciously enjoyed being the successful one in their relationship. "I think," Simone continued, "you fell in love with how loving me made you feel about yourself. But I needed someone who could love me at full strength, not someone who needed me to dim my light to shine brighter." A maintenance worker approaching to close the cemetery gates gave them a pointed look. "I should go," Simone said. "When will I see you again?" "You won't," she replied with sad certainty. "Because the woman you want to see, the grateful, dependent girl who made you feel like a hero, she was never real. And the woman I actually am deserves better than someone who needed her to be smaller, to love her bigger." As she walked away between the headstones, Rai finally understood the impossible nature of his task. He wasn't trying to win back the woman he'd married. He was trying to become worthy of the woman she'd always been. But transformation, he was learning, required more than grand gestures or charitable donations. It required the hardest work of all, fundamentally changing who he was inside. Standing alone among the graves of people who'd loved and lost, Rai made a quiet promise to his ex-wife's mother's memory. "I'm going to become the man your daughter deserved to marry. Even if it's too late for us, I'm going to become him." The wind through the cypress trees sounded almost like approval, or perhaps that was just wishful thinking from a man who'd learned that some mistakes require a lifetime to repair. But the most profound journeys begin not with the first step forward, but with the courage to acknowledge how far backward you've actually traveled from where you needed to be. Chapter 9. The Mirror of Truth. Sometimes the person you need to become can only be discovered by working with people who have nothing to give you except the chance to give everything of yourself. 18 months after the divorce that had shattered his world, Rai Benjamin walked through the doors of Sacred Heart Community Center not as heir to a jewelry empire, but as a volunteer who'd been scrubbing floors and serving meals for 6 months. The transformation was so complete that even he barely recognized the man he'd become. "Morning, Mr. B," called out 12-year-old Elena Rodriguez, bouncing over with the irrepressible energy that had made her his favorite student in the after-school program. "Are you ready for our chess match today?" "I don't know," Rai grinned, genuinely happy for the first time in months. "You've been practicing those openings I taught you. I might be in trouble." Elena beamed with pride. 6 months ago, she'd been failing in school and acting out at home. Now she was tutoring younger kids in math and had discovered a gift for strategic thinking that extended far beyond the chessboard. "Elena's mother wants to thank you again," said Sister Catherine, the nun who coordinated the center's educational programs. "Her grades have improved dramatically since you started working with her." Elena did all the work, Rai replied, meaning it. I just showed her she was already smart enough. What had begun as penance had become purpose. Rai discovered that working with these children, kids who had every excuse to be bitter about life's unfairness, taught him more about resilience and gratitude than his privileged upbringing ever had. They didn't care about his former wealth or his family name. They cared about whether he showed up, whether he kept his promises, whether he genuinely invested in their success. Mr. B, can you help me with something? Elena approached him during the lunch break, her usual confidence replaced by unusual hesitation. Of course, what's going on? My mum's been crying a lot lately. She says we might have to move because she can't afford the rent. But I love my school now, and I don't want to leave my friends. Rai's heart clenched. Elena's mother worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment, and even that wasn't enough in San Francisco's brutal housing market. Let me talk to Sister Catherine, he said gently. Maybe we can figure something out. You'd do that, but we can't pay you back. Elena, the best things in life aren't about paying back. They're about paying forward. Later that afternoon, Rai quietly arranged for an anonymous donation to cover Elena's family's housing costs for the next year. It was money he couldn't really afford from his drastically reduced circumstances, but seeing Elena's relief when she learned they wouldn't have to move was worth more than any luxury he'd ever owned. You've changed, observed Dr. James Harrison, the center's director, as they cleaned up after the day's programs. When you first started volunteering, I could tell you were here for someone else's approval. Now you're here for the right reasons. What are the right reasons? You tell me. Rai considered the question as he helped stack chairs. Because these kids deserve someone who believes in them. Because everyone needs to know they matter to somebody. Because ... He paused, understanding flooding through him. Because this is who I want to be. Not because it might impress anyone, but because it makes me a better person. Dr. Harrison nodded approvingly. That's the difference between charity and service. Charity is about feeling good about yourself. Service is about making others feel valued. That evening, Rai walked home to his studio apartment, a space barely larger than his former walk-in closet, and felt more at peace than he had in years. His simple life had taught him to appreciate small pleasures, a good book, a home-cooked meal, the satisfaction of earning someone's trust through consistent action rather than inherited privilege. What he didn't know was that Simone had been watching. Manuel Communications' security team provided her with regular reports on his activities, initially to ensure he wasn't planning any dramatic confrontations. But as months passed, the reports began to tell a different story. They described a man who arrived early and stayed late at the community center, who remembered every child's name and their individual struggles, who celebrated their victories as if they were his own. He's been working with at-risk youth for 8 months now, her head of security reported during their monthly briefing. No publicity, no media coverage. He specifically requested that his involvement remain anonymous. Anonymous? Simone looked up from the Manuel Communications quarterly report she'd been reviewing. That doesn't sound like the man I knew. According to our sources, he's refusing interview requests and has turned down photo opportunities that would have generated positive press for his reputation. Simone set down her papers, intrigued despite herself. The Rai she'd been married to had never missed an opportunity for positive attention. There's something else, the security chief continued. He's been living well below his means. Studio apartment, modest car, simple lifestyle. He's donating most of his remaining assets to various children's charities. Most of his assets? Everything except basic living expenses. Our financial analysis suggests he's keeping just enough to maintain a lower middle-class lifestyle. For the first time in months, Simone felt her carefully constructed emotional walls crack slightly. This didn't match the pattern of a man trying to win her back through manipulation. This sounded like genuine transformation. "I want to see for myself," she decided impulsively. "Ma'am? Arrange for me to visit the community center. Anonymously. I need to see what kind of man he's become." 3 days later, Simone entered Sacred Heart Community Center wearing simple jeans and a baseball cap, her famous face partially hidden behind sunglasses. She positioned herself in the back of the main hall where families gathered for the evening meal program. What she saw took her breath away. Rai knelt beside a little boy struggling with homework, his patience infinite as he guided small fingers through math problems. His designer suits had been replaced by jeans and polo shirts, his Rolex traded for a simple Timex. But the most dramatic change was in his demeanor. Gone was the unconscious arrogance of privilege, replaced by the genuine humility of someone who'd learned to serve rather than be served. "Remember, Marcus," Rai was saying to the struggling child, "making mistakes is how we learn. The important thing is trying again." "But I'm stupid at math," the boy replied with 7-year-old despair. "You're not stupid. You just haven't found the way that works for your brain yet. Everyone learns differently." Simone watched as Rai spent 20 minutes helping Marcus understand basic addition, celebrating the boy's small victories as if he'd solved quantum physics. This was the man she'd fallen in love with in that Stanford coffee shop. Patient, kind, genuinely invested in others' success. Mr. B Elena Rodriguez appeared at Rai's elbow. "My mom wants to know if you can come to dinner Sunday. She's making her special tamales." "I'd be honored," Rai replied, and Simone could see he meant it. "Tell her I'll bring dessert." "She says you don't have to bring anything. You already gave us so much. Eleanor, your friendship is worth more than anything I could give you." Watching this exchange, Simone felt her heart flutter with dangerous recognition. This was the man she'd hoped he could become, someone who understood that true wealth came from relationships, not bank accounts. "He's different now," said a voice beside her. Simone turned to find Sister Catherine, who'd apparently recognized her despite the disguise. "Sister, Don't worry, child. Your secret is safe, but I think you should see what that young man has become. He hurt me very badly. Yes, he did. And he spent every day since then trying to become worthy of the forgiveness he knows he doesn't deserve." They watched as Rai helped an elderly woman navigate the food line, his attention completely focused on her needs rather than any personal agenda. "The man who started volunteering here was angry and broken," Sister Catherine continued. "He was doing community service like penance, trying to earn something he'd lost. But somewhere along the way, he stopped trying to earn anything and started just caring about these people." "How can you tell the difference?" "Because earning has an end point. Caring doesn't." As the evening wound down, Simone prepared to leave unnoticed. But as she reached the exit, she heard Eleanor's voice raised in distress. "Mr. B, what's wrong? You look sad." Rai was standing by the windows, staring out at the street where Simone's car had been parked. "Sometimes you catch a glimpse of something beautiful that you lost," he said quietly, "and it reminds you of what your life could have been if you'd been a better person." "But you are a good person," Elena insisted, with the fierce loyalty children reserve for adults who've earned their trust. "I'm trying to be, but some mistakes are so big that becoming a good person isn't enough to fix them." "Then what do you do?" Rai knelt to Elena's level, and Simone saw tears in his eyes. "You keep trying to be good anyway, not because it might fix your mistakes, but because the people around you deserve to know someone cares about them." Driving home that night, Simone found herself crying for the first time since the divorce, not from pain, but from the bittersweet recognition of the man Rai had become. He was finally the person she'd always believed he could be, transformed by loss into someone who understood that true strength came from lifting others up rather than standing above them. But recognition and forgiveness were different countries, and the distance between them was measured in the magnitude of trust that had been shattered. Could she risk her heart again with someone who'd proven capable of believing the worst about her? Could she trust that his transformation was permanent rather than just another elaborate performance? The questions haunted her as she returned to her empty mansion, surrounded by luxury that felt increasingly meaningless. For the first time since the divorce, Simone Manuel, now 27 and wiser from heartbreak, found herself wondering if second chances were possible for people who'd loved each other badly the first time. The cruelest irony of human growth is that we often become who we were meant to be only after losing the person who could have loved us at our best, leaving us to wonder if transformation born from loss can ever be trusted by the heart that inspired it. Chapter 10. The Ultimate Proof. True love reveals itself not in the promises we make when life is perfect, but in the sacrifices we offer when everything we've built lies in ashes and the only thing left to give is the very essence of who we are. The emergency call came at 2:47 a.m. on a rain-soaked Tuesday in October. David Manuel, the media titan who controlled information flows across 6 continents, collapsed in his Manhattan penthouse office while reviewing acquisition reports. By the time paramedics reached him, the 78-year-old billionaire was fighting for his life against a massive coronary event that threatened to claim the only family Simone had left. "Daddy, please," Simone whispered, gripping his unconscious hand in the intensive care unit at Mount Sinai Hospital. "You can't leave me too, not after everything." For 48 hours, David Manuel teetered between life and death, while Manuel Communications stock plummeted in global markets. Board members pressed Simone for decisions about the empire's future, but she couldn't think beyond her father's labored breathing and the machines that kept him anchored to the world. "Ms. Manuel," Dr. Elizabeth Carter approached with the gentle authority of someone accustomed to delivering life-altering news. "Your father's condition has stabilized, but he's developed complications. We need to perform emergency surgery, but there's a critical problem." "What kind of problem?" "Your father has AB negative blood, the rarest blood type, found in only 0.6% of the population. Our blood bank is completely depleted, and we need compatible donors immediately for the surgery to be safe." Simone felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "Test me." "We already did." "You have type A positive. I'm sorry." Within an hour, every hospital in New York had been contacted. David Manuel's security team reached out to medical facilities across the East Coast. The family's private physicians flew in from Switzerland and London, but AB negative blood remained elusive and time was running out. "We're testing every staff member, every family member present," Dr. Carter explained, as technicians drew blood from anyone willing. "But the statistical probability—" "Test everyone," Simone commanded with the authority of someone accustomed to moving mountains. "I don't care about probability. Find a match." One by one, potential donors were ruled out. David Manuel's business partners, his household staff, even the hospital's senior physicians, none carried the extraordinarily rare blood type that could save his life. As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the hospital in shades of desperation, Simone found herself alone in the family waiting room, surrounded by luxury that felt meaningless in the face of her father's mortality. At 27, she was about to lose the only person who'd ever loved her unconditionally, and all her billions couldn't buy the one thing she needed. "Ms. Manuel?" She looked up to find a familiar figure standing in the doorway, looking as though he'd run through hell to get there. Rai Benjamin, still wearing his Sacred Heart Community Center volunteer shirt, his hair disheveled and his eyes wide with concern. "Rai, how did you—" "I heard about your father on the news. I came as soon as I could." "You came from San Francisco?" "I took the first flight. I. He ran his hand through his hair, suddenly uncertain. I know you don't want to see me, but I thought maybe you might need— I don't need anything from you, Simone said automatically, but the words lacked conviction. The truth was that seeing him there, when she felt most alone in the world, provided a comfort she hadn't expected. I know, Rai said quietly, but I'm staying anyway. The hospital is testing everyone for blood compatibility, she found herself explaining. Daddy has a B-negative blood, and we can't find a donor anywhere. Test me. The words were spoken without hesitation, without calculation, just immediate, absolute willingness to help. Rai, the chances are— Test me, he repeated firmly. Please. Dr. Carter emerged 20 minutes later with an expression of amazement that made Simone's heart stop. It's a perfect match, she announced incredulously. A B-negative, the same extraordinarily rare type. We can proceed with surgery immediately. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Of all the people in New York, of all the medical professionals and family friends and business associates who'd been tested, the one person whose blood could save her father's life was her ex-husband. The statistical impossibility felt like destiny. Are you sure you want to do this? Simone asked, as nurses prepared Rai for the donation procedure. Are you seriously asking me that question? This is major surgery for Daddy. You'd be giving a lot of blood, and there are risks. Simone, Rai interrupted gently, he's your father. That's all I need to know. As they prepared for the transfusion, David Manuel briefly regained consciousness. His eyes found Rai standing beside his daughter, and recognition flickered across his face. You're the boy who broke my daughter's heart, he whispered. Yes, sir, I'm sorry for that. More sorry than I can ever express. Then why are you here? Rai met the older man's gaze steadily. Because she loves you, and that's enough reason for me to do anything I can to help. David Manuel studied Rai's face for a long moment, then looked at his daughter. This is not the same man who divorced you. No, Simone agreed softly. It's not. During the transfusion, as Rai's blood literally flowed into David Manuel's veins, he held Simone's hand and told her things he'd never had the courage to say before. I need you to know, he said quietly, that discovering who you really are didn't make me love you less. It made me realize I'd never loved you enough. Rai, let me finish, please. I spent our entire marriage thinking I was lucky to have someone like you. But the truth is, you were slumming it with someone like me. You gave up a throne to sit in diners with a man too insecure to appreciate the sacrifice. Simone watched the blood flow from his arm to the bag that would save her father's life. Why are you doing this? Really? Because 18 months ago you told me that loving someone means believing in them even when circumstances look bad. You told me that marriage means choosing to trust your partner over everyone else. I failed those tests completely. And now I understand that love isn't about what you can get from someone. It's about what you're willing to give without expecting anything back. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Rai waited in the family lounge, weak from the blood loss, but refusing to leave until they knew David Manuel would survive. Simone sat beside him, and for the first time since their divorce, the silence between them felt peaceful rather than painful. He's going to be fine, Doctor, Carter announced as dawn broke over Manhattan. The surgery was completely successful. Mr. Manuel is awake and asking for his daughter. In the recovery room, David Manuel gripped both their hands with surprising strength. Young man, he said to Rai, my daughter tells me you've been working with underprivileged children. Yes, sir. And that you gave away your fortune to charity. It seemed like the right thing to do. David Manuel smiled weakly. Do you know what I've learned in 78 years of life? What's that, sir? That character isn't revealed in success. It's revealed in how someone responds to failure. You failed my daughter terribly, son. but your response to that failure tells me who you really are inside. 6 months later, Simone and Rai stood before Judge Patricia Coleman again, not for divorce, but for remarriage. The same courtroom that had witnessed the destruction of their first union now hosted its resurrection. Do you, Rai Benjamin, take Simone Manuel to be your wife, promising to trust her heart even when circumstances suggest otherwise? I do, Rai said, his voice strong and clear. I promise to believe in her when believing is difficult, to trust her when trust requires courage, and to love her not in spite of who she is, but because of who she is. Do you, Simone Manuel, take Rai Benjamin to be your husband, promising to share your whole self, including the parts you've kept hidden? I do. Simone smiled through tears of joy. I promise to trust him with my truth, my heart, and my complete faith that the man I'm marrying today is the man I'll grow old with. The small gathering of family and friends erupted in celebration, but for Rai and Simone, the world had narrowed to just the two of them, finally, completely and eternally united in truth. David Manuel, fully recovered and beaming with pride, raised his champagne glass. To second chances and first loves, to my daughter who taught a man how to see clearly, and to my new son who proved that love can transform anyone willing to do the hard work of becoming worthy of it. Rai pulled Simone close, marveling at how perfectly she fit in his arms. I love you, Mrs. Benjamin, he whispered. All of you, the coffee shop girl, the hidden heiress, and every beautiful, complicated piece in between. I love you too, she replied, her eyes sparkling with pure happiness. The man you were, the man you became, and the man you're still becoming every day. Their love story had survived deception, betrayal, heartbreak, and pride to emerge stronger and more beautiful than ever. Because the greatest love stories aren't about people who never face challenges. They're about people who choose to fight for each other even after they've lost their way. And sometimes, when love is tested by the ultimate sacrifice, it reveals that the most precious things in life aren't found in bank accounts or family names, but in the willingness to give everything, including your very blood, for someone whose happiness matters more than your own survival.